This dirty, scratched little penny looks like it belongs in a junk drawer, but one just like it sold for over $100,000, and the craziest part. Most people would have spent it without thinking twice. There are rare Lincoln wheat pennies hiding in plain sight right now, coins that look damaged, worn, even ugly, but could secretly be worth a small fortune. Most people see this 1943 Lincoln penny and instantly think it's worthless, it's grey, dull, and doesn't even look like a real penny. Some people even mistake it for a token or a fake coin. But here's the truth, while millions were made, certain versions of this exact coin have sold for thousands, even tens of thousands of dollars, and the difference comes down to a few tiny details that most people completely overlook. Back in 1943, the United States was deep in World War II. Copper was desperately needed for ammunition and military equipment, so the US Mint made a dramatic change. Instead of the usual copper, pennies were struck in steel and coated with zinc, giving them that unusual silver-gray color. It was the only year in US history when regular pennies looked like this, which is why they stand out so much today. Now here's where it gets interesting. Because these coins were made quickly and in massive numbers, many of them came out with flaws, variations, and subtle differences. And those small details can turn what looks like a dirty old coin into something incredibly valuable. First, pay attention to the condition, even though we're talking about uglier coins. A lot of these steel pennies were poorly stored over the years. They rusted, they corroded, they developed dark spots or streaks. Most people assume that kills the value. But surprisingly, even worn or slightly damaged 1943 steel pennies can still sell for decent money, especially if the key features are intact. Look closely at the surface. If your coin still has a strong steel shine underneath the dirt or discoloration, that's a good sign. Coins that avoided heavy rust damage are far more desirable. But here's something many people miss: some collectors actually look for coins with unique toning or unusual patterns, especially if they're natural and not cleaned. Now check the date and mint mark. Under the year 1943, you might see a tiny letter. No letter means it was made in Philadelphia. A D means Denver. An S means San Francisco. All three mints produce these steel pennies, but some are slightly more desirable than others depending on condition and rarity. Here's a simple clue you can use right at home: grab a magnet. A real 1943 steel penny will stick to it instantly. That's because it's made of steel. If your 1943 penny does not stick to a magnet, stop everything. That could be something extremely rare and valuable, possibly worth tens or even hundreds of thousands. Those are the famous copper errors from 1943, and they are among the most valuable coins in US history. But even if your coin does stick, don't lose interest yet. Another thing to look for is doubling. Check the date and the word Liberty. If the letters or numbers look slightly doubled or blurred, that could indicate a minting error. These kinds of errors are often missed because people assume the coin is just worn or damaged, but in reality, that ugly look could be hiding a valuable mistake. Also pay attention to the edges and rim. If the rim looks strong and complete, that's a positive sign. Coins with clear edges tend to be more collectible, even if the center looks worn. Now let's talk real numbers. A typical worn 1943 steel penny might only be worth a few cents to a couple of dollars. But if it's in better condition, values can jump to $10, $20, even $50 or more. Coins with strong detail and minimal corrosion can reach into the hundreds. And if you have one with a rare error or exceptional condition, you could be looking at thousands. There have even been examples of high-grade 1943 steel pennies selling for over $10,000 at auction. And again, that's for a coin many people would ignore because it doesn't even look like a normal penny. The biggest mistake people make is cleaning these coins. The moment you try to scrub off that ugly surface, you can destroy the value instantly. Collectors want originality, even if it looks dirty or worn. That natural aging is part of the coin story, and once it's gone forever. So if you find a 1943 steel penny, don't judge it by its appearance. That dull grey color, those scratches, even the spots and discoloration, they don't automatically mean it's worthless. In fact, those exact features might be hiding something special. Next coin. At first glance, this 1909 penny looks exactly like the kind most people ignore, stark, worn down, maybe even scratched from decades of use. You can barely see the details, and to most people, it feels like just another old coin with no real value. But here's the shocking truth: some of these exact pennies have sold for tens of thousands of dollars, and the difference between a common one and a rare one comes down to a tiny little letter that most people never even notice. The year 1909 is incredibly important in coin collecting. This was the very first year the Lincoln wheat penny was ever made, introduced to honor the 100th birthday of Abraham Lincoln. That alone makes it special. But what really makes certain 1909 pennies explode in value is the mint mark, specifically, the small S that appears just below the date. That S stands for San Francisco, and far fewer of these coins were made compared to the ones from Philadelphia. So right away, if you see a 1909 penny with an S, you're already holding something much more collectible than the average wheat penny. But don't stop there, because this is where things get even more interesting. Some 1909 S pennies also include the designer's initials on the reverse side, tiny letters of VDB at the bottom of the coin. These stand for Victor David Brenner, the man who designed the coin. Those initials caused controversy back in 1909 and were quickly removed, which makes the coins that still have them extremely rare and valuable today. Now here's the key moment: you need to flip your coin over and look at the bottom on the reverse side. If you see those small VDB initials, you might be holding one of the most famous and valuable pennies in American history. Even in worn, scratched condition, a 1909 SVDB penny can sell for hundreds to thousands of dollars. In better condition, values can jump to $5,000, $10,000, even much higher depending on how strong the details are. But even if your coin does not have the VDB initials, don't lose hope. A regular 1909 S penny without the initials is still highly collectible. Many of these coins, even when they look dark and heavily circulated, can still be worth $100 to $500 or more. Now let's talk about what to actually look for, because this is where many people miss out. First, check that S mint mark carefully. It should be small, clear, and located just below the date. If it looks oddly shaped, too big, or out of place, be cautious. There are fake coins out there where people have added an S to increase the value. A genuine mint mark should look natural and consistent with the rest of the coin. Next, look at the date itself. Even if the coin is worn, the 1909 should still be readable. Coins with clear dates always carry more value than ones that are completely faded. Now examine the overall surface. Yes, we're talking about ugly coins, but there's a difference between natural wear and damage. A coin that is evenly worn over time can still be very desirable. But deep scratches, heavy gouges, or signs of cleaning can reduce the value significantly. And here's something many people don't realize: dark color is not a bad thing. In fact, many old copper coins naturally turn brown or even almost black over time. That doesn't hurt the value if it's original. What collectors don't want is a coin that's been polished or cleaned to look shiny. That actually makes it less valuable. Also, check the wheat ears on the back of the coin. Even if they're faint, being able to see some detail in those lines is a good sign. Stronger detail usually means higher value. Now let's talk about real-world numbers again. A heavily worn 1909 S penny might still bring in $100 or more. A nicer example could easily reach several $100s. And if you happen to have the 1909 SVDB version, even in rough shape, you could be sitting on thousands without even realizing it. Next coin. This next penny is one of the easiest to overlook, a 1952 D Lincoln wheat penny. It usually looks dark, worn, maybe even a little scratched up from years of circulation. Most people would toss it aside without a second thought. After all, it's not that old compared to early 1900s coins, so how valuable could it really be? But here's where things get interesting. Certain 1952 D pennies, even in rough condition, have sold for hundreds, and in rare cases, thousands of dollars. And just like the others, the secret isn't how pretty the coin looks, it's in the tiny details most people never check. The deed mint mark means this coin was made in Denver. Millions were produced, so at first glance, it doesn't sound rare at all. But what makes some of these coins valuable are small minting mistakes and subtle features that can turn an ordinary-looking penny into a collector's prize. Start by looking closely at the date, 1952. This is one of the most important areas to inspect. Some 1952 pennies show what's called doubling. That means the numbers can appear slightly doubled or shadowed, especially under good lighting. To the average person, it just looks like wear or damage, but to a collector, that could mean extra value. Now move your attention to the word Liberty on the left side of the coin. If the letters look thick, slightly doubled, or not perfectly sharp, that's another clue. These small irregularities are often overlooked because people assume the coin is just worn out. But in reality, that imperfect look might be exactly what makes it valuable. Next, check "In God We Trust" across the top. Even slight doubling or unusual spacing in these letters can increase interest from collectors. Again, these are tiny details, you might need to tilt the coin under light to really notice them. Now let's talk about condition, but not in the way most people think. Yes, shiny coins are nice, but with older pennies like this, originality matters more than appearance. A naturally aged coin with a dark brown color can still be quite valuable. In fact, many collectors prefer that over a coin that looks cleaned or artificially bright. So if your 1952 penny looks dirty, don't rush to clean it. That ugly surface might actually be preserving its value. Cleaning it could instantly reduce what someone is willing to pay. Another thing to check is the rim. Even if the center of the coin is worn, a strong, complete rim around the edge is a good sign. It means the coin hasn't been overly damaged or worn down beyond recognition. Now here's something a lot of people miss: die cracks and small marks. Look for thin raised lines on the surface of the coin. These aren't scratches, they are actually part of the metal, caused by tiny cracks in the die during production. These kinds of mint errors can make a coin more unique and collectible. Also, pay attention to the overall strike. If the details, like Lincoln's profile or the wheat stalks on the back, still show some definition, even faintly, that adds to the value. Coins that aren't completely flat tend to be more desirable. So what are we really talking about in terms of money? A typical worn 1952 penny might only be worth a few cents, maybe $1 or $2. But if you find one with noticeable doubling, a strong strike, or interesting mint errors, the value can jump to $20, $50, even $100 or more. Next coin. This next coin might throw you off completely, because at first glance, it doesn't even look American. It's a 2006 Canadian 1-cent coin, small, copper-colored, often scratched, dull, and usually ignored. Most people in the US would see it and think it's just foreign change with no real value. But here's the twist: some of these exact coins have sold for surprising amounts of money, and the secret again comes down to tiny details that almost nobody pays attention to. Now before anything else, let's clear something up. This isn't a Lincoln wheat penny. It's from Canada. But coins like this still end up mixed into jars, collections, and even pocket change across the US, especially near borders or in old coin lots. And because they look unfamiliar or unimportant, they're often overlooked, which is exactly why they can be hiding value. The 2006 Canadian penny features Queen Elizabeth II on the front and the classic maple leaf twig design on the back. It was one of the last years before Canada eventually stopped producing pennies altogether, which already makes it more interesting to collectors. But what really matters here is the small kilogram mint mark. Flip the coin and look carefully near the design. You're searching for those tiny letters kilogram. These initials stand for the Royal Canadian Mint's engraver, and coins with this mark were part of a special production variation. Not every 2006 penny has it, which immediately makes it more collectible. Now here's where people make a big mistake. They assume because the coin looks worn, scratched, or even slightly dirty, it must be worthless. But just like the US coins we've talked about, that's not true at all. In fact, many of these coins were heavily circulated, which means finding one with clear details, even if it's not shiny, can still be valuable. The key is not perfection, it's recognition. Start by checking the lettering. Look at Elizabeth II and the date 2006. If those are still readable and not completely worn away, that's a good sign. Next, inspect the maple leaf design on the back. Even if it's faint, being able to see the veins or shape of the leaves adds to the coin's appeal. Completely flat designs tend to be less desirable, but partial detail still counts. Now look for anything unusual. This is where hidden value can really appear. Some 2006 pennies show small minting quirks like slight doubling, uneven surfaces, or minor die imperfections. These are easy to miss because they can look like damage, but they might actually be mint errors. This final penny might look like absolute junk at first glance, a 1955 Lincoln wheat penny that's worn down, scratched, maybe even a little faded from decades of use. Most people wouldn't give it a second look. But here's the shocking truth: one version of this exact coin has sold for over $100,000, and even in rough, uglier condition, it can still be worth thousands. And the reason comes down to one of the most famous minting mistakes in American history. In 1955, something unusual happened during production at the Philadelphia Mint. A batch of pennies was struck with a dramatic doubling effect. Not the tiny, hard-to-see kind, but bold, obvious doubling that you can spot with your naked eye. This is what collectors call the 1955 double-die penny, and it's one of the most valuable and recognizable error coins ever made. Now here's where it gets exciting for your viewers. You don't need fancy equipment to check this coin. In fact, the doubling is so strong that once you know what to look for, it practically jumps out at you. Start with the date, 1955. On a valuable double-die version, the numbers will look clearly doubled, almost like there's a shadow behind them. Next, look at Liberty on the left side. This is the biggest clue. The letters will appear thick, bold, and distinctly doubled. It won't look like simple wear, it will look like two impressions slightly offset from each other. Then check "In God We Trust" across the top. On genuine double-die coins, this phrase is heavily doubled as well. The effect is strong, dramatic, and easy to notice once you know it's there. And here's the key point: this doubling is part of the coin itself. It's not damage. It's not caused by wear. It happened during the minting process, which is exactly why collectors value it so highly. Now think about this. Because these coins were released into circulation, many people used them like normal pennies. They got scratched, worn down, and dirty over time. Some even sat in jars or drawers for decades, completely unnoticed. That means there are still examples out there that don't look impressive at all, but are actually worth serious money. Even a heavily worn 1955 double-die penny can sell for $1,000 to $5,000 or more. In better condition, values can jump to $10,000, $25,000, even beyond $50,000 depending on quality. And yes, top condition examples have crossed the $100,000 mark. But what if your 1955 penny doesn't show that strong doubling? Don't worry, it can still have value. A regular 1955 wheat penny without the error is usually worth a few cents to a few dollars depending on condition. But because this year is so famous, it's always worth checking carefully. Many people miss the doubling because they assume the coin is just worn or damaged. Also, be aware, there are weaker forms of doubling that are much less valuable. The true high-value version has very bold, obvious doubling that stands out immediately. Now let's talk about condition again, because this is where people make a huge mistake. If you find one of these coins, do not clean it.